46 years. That is how long the Islamic Republic of Iran has maintained its grip on one of the most strategically positioned nations on the planet. 46 years of supreme leaders, revolutionary guards, export of ideology, nuclear ambition, proxy armies stretching from Beirut to Baghdad to Sana'a. 46 years of surviving American sanctions, Israeli strikes, internal uprisings, and the complete economic strangulation of a country sitting on the fourth largest proven oil reserves on Earth. For nearly half a century, the clerical establishment in Tehran looked unshakable, untouchable, permanent. It is no longer any of those things. Something is tearing through Iran right now in April 2026 that has no modern historical precedent. Not the 1979 revolution, not the 1988 ceasefire humiliation that Khomeini himself described as drinking poison, not the 2009 Green Movement that shook the regime but never broke it, not the 2019 protests, where security forces killed over 500 people in a single week just to restore order. Not even the Woman Life Freedom Uprising of 2022 that set the country ablaze for months. What is happening right now is different in kind, not just in degree. It is a simultaneous structural collapse across military, economic, diplomatic, psychological, and political dimensions, all hitting at the same time, all feeding each other, all accelerating, and the people running Iran know it. Let us start with the numbers, because the numbers alone should make you stop whatever you're doing. Iran's currency, the rial, has lost approximately 92% of its value against the US dollar in the last 6 years. Not 92% since the revolution, 92% in 6 years. A currency that was trading at roughly 42,000 rials to the dollar in 2018 is now hovering around 900,000 rials to the dollar in early 2026. That is not inflation. That is a currency in the process of dying in real time in front of the people who depend on it to buy bread, medicine, and cooking gas. Official inflation in Iran has averaged above 40% annually for the past 4 consecutive years. Unofficial estimates from me, economists inside Iran put real inflation on basic food staples closer to 80% year over year. A working class Iranian family that could afford a modest diet in 2020 is now spending between 60 and 70% of their entire monthly income just on food. Not rent, not transportation, not medicine, just food. The unemployment rate among Iranians between the ages of 15 and 29, the exact demographic that fills streets during revolutions, officially sits at 28%. Independent Iranian economists believe the real number, accounting for disguised unemployment and people who have stopped looking, is closer to 40% for that age group. Iran has a population of approximately 88 million people. Roughly 60% of that population is under the age of 35. You are looking at a country where tens of millions of young people have essentially no economic future inside the system that governs them, and they know it, and they have known it for years, and they have been told for years that their sacrifice for the revolution will eventually be rewarded, and they no longer believe that. They stopped believing it a long time ago. What has changed is that they have now also stopped being afraid. That shift from economic despair to the disappearance of fear is the single most dangerous thing that can happen to an authoritarian government. And it is happening in Iran right now at a speed that is genuinely alarming people who study political collapse for a living. But the economic catastrophe is only one layer of what is happening, because sitting on top of the financial collapse is a military catastrophe that Iran has not even begun to publicly process. In April 2024, Israel did something that no country had done in the 46-year history of the Islamic Republic. It struck Iranian soil directly, inside Iran, hitting military assets, near Isfahan, targeting radar systems, demonstrating in the clearest possible terms that the air defense architecture protecting the Iranian state was penetrable, and doing so with almost total impunity. The Iranian government's response was to essentially pretend it had not happened. State media minimized it. Officials denied the severity. The supreme leader said nothing substantive for days, because there was nothing they could say. The mythology of regime invulnerability, carefully constructed over decades, essential to the psychological contract between the clerical state and the population it rules, had cracked in front of the entire world. Then came the dismantling of the proxy network. For decades, Iran's strategic depth was not its own military. Iran's military is substantial, but not overwhelming on conventional terms. Its real power projection came through what analysts call the axis of resistance: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthi movement in Yemen, various Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria. This was Iran's insurance policy, its forward defense, its deterrence. The idea was that any enemy attacking Iran directly would face retaliation not from Iranian missiles alone, but from dozens of armed groups across a dozen countries simultaneously. It was genuinely clever strategic architecture. It worked for a long time. It is now being systematically dismantled. Hezbollah, the crown jewel of that network, the group into which Iran poured an estimated $800 million annually for over 3 decades, the organization that survived the 2006 war with Israel and emerged stronger, the force that had accumulated an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles, that Hezbollah entered 2024 as a functioning military and political power and entered 2025 as an organization in a condition of near institutional collapse. Its Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah, the figure who more than any other individual embodied the axis of resistance, was killed in September 2024. Its senior military commanders were systematically eliminated. Its command and control infrastructure was penetrated at a level that is still not fully understood publicly, but that internal Iranian assessments apparently describe as catastrophic. The weapon stockpiles that took 30 years to build were largely destroyed. The political position Hezbollah held in Lebanon, the state within the state, is now under pressure it has never faced before. Hamas, the second pillar of the network, has been functionally destroyed as a military organization in Gaza. Its top leadership is dead. Its tunnel infrastructure, which Iran helped fund and which served as the model for underground warfare across the Axis, has been systematically collapsed. Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe of a scale that is difficult to even describe in words, and Iran, which positioned itself as the champion of Palestinian resistance for 46 years, could do essentially nothing to prevent it. The most powerful symbol of Iranian regional influence, the claim that the axis of resistance would eventually liberate Palestine, has been exposed in the most brutal possible way as something Iran could not and would not back with the full weight of its power when the moment of ultimate testing arrived. The Houthis in Yemen are still operational. They are still firing missiles and drones. But their strategic value to Iran has shifted from offensive power projection to what is essentially a pressure nuisance, capable of disrupting Red Sea shipping and generating headlines, but no longer part of a coherent regional strategy, because the regional strategy itself no longer exists in its previous form. And then Syria happened. In December 2024, Bashar al-Assad's government, the government that Iran spent an estimated $30 to $50 billion propping up over 13 years of civil war, the government that served as the land bridge connecting Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the government whose survival was one of the most significant strategic investments the Islamic Republic ever made, collapsed in 11 days. Not months, not weeks. 11 days. The regime that Iran bled treasure and personnel to preserve for over a decade evaporated faster than anyone thought possible. The land bridge to Lebanon is gone. The physical corridor that allowed Iranian weapons, money, and personnel to flow westward into the heart of the Arab world simply no longer exists. The strategic logic that made the entire western flank of the axis of resistance function has been physically severed. Iranian officials describe the fall of Assad privately as a catastrophe. That word, catastrophe, appears to be the one they kept using in internal communications that have since become partially known. And it was a catastrophe. But it was a catastrophe sitting on top of a catastrophe, which was sitting on top of another catastrophe, which is the part that makes what is happening in Iran in 2026 different from anything that has come before. Because it is not one crisis, it is all of them, simultaneously. Inside Iran itself, the political situation is deteriorating in ways that the regime's own internal security services are apparently struggling to manage. The reformist movement has effectively been destroyed as a meaningful political force through decades of disqualification, imprisonment, and marginalization. What has replaced it is not a more moderate reformism. What has replaced it is something the regime finds far more threatening, a population that has largely stopped engaging with the political system entirely. Voter turnout in the 2024 Iranian presidential election that brought Masoud Pezeshkian to power was approximately 40%. 40%. In a country where the government spends enormous resources encouraging participation as a demonstration of legitimacy, where religious authorities frame voting as a religious duty, 40% turnout in a presidential election is a number that describes a population that has psychologically checked out of the system that governs it. And significant portions of that 40% who did vote did so not out of enthusiasm for the Islamic Republic, but out of a calculation that the slightly less hardline candidate might marginally slow the pace of collapse. Pezeshkian himself is in a position of extraordinary difficulty. He was elected on a platform of economic relief and diplomatic engagement. He inherited an economy in free fall, a nuclear program under maximum pressure, a regional network in ruins, a military that has just watched its deterrence mythology punctured, and a supreme leader in Ali Khamenei who is 85 years old, whose health has been the subject of intense speculation for years, and whose succession represents perhaps the single most destabilizing event that could occur in the Islamic Republic's history. because there is no consensus candidate, because the institutions that would manage the transition are themselves weakened, and because the Revolutionary Guard, the one institution that retains real coercive power, has its own political and economic interests that may not align with any particular successor. The nuclear program deserves its own examination because it sits at the center of everything. Iran is now assessed by multiple intelligence agencies to be weeks, not months, away from having enough highly enriched uranium to build a nuclear weapon if it made the political decision to do so. That assessment has been essentially stable for about 2 years. The decision to actually weaponize, to build the device, to test it or demonstrate it, to cross the threshold that changes Iran's strategic position permanently, has apparently not been made. And the reason it has apparently not been made is the reason that explains so much of what is happening in Iran right now. The regime calculates that crossing that threshold would trigger a military response, almost certainly from Israel and possibly with American support, that would target not just the nuclear infrastructure, but the physical foundations of the Islamic Republic itself. The nuclear program is simultaneously Iran's most powerful leverage and its most dangerous liability. It has kept adversaries cautious. It has also made Iran a permanent target. And in an environment where Iran's conventional military capacity, its proxy deterrence, and its economic stability have all been severely degraded simultaneously, the nuclear question has become not an asset to be deployed, but a knife that Iran is holding by the blade, unable to use it, unable to put it down. The Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, is the institution that holds the Islamic Republic together in the most literal sense. It controls significant portions of the Iranian economy, estimated at somewhere between 20 and 30% of GDP, through its business conglomerate Khatam al-Anbiya and associated entities. It controls the domestic repression apparatus that has kept the regime in power through every uprising. It controls the nuclear program. It controls the missile program. It is the state within the state within the state. And it is under a level of pressure it has not faced in its entire 46-year history. Israeli intelligence penetration of the IRGC and associated networks has reached a level that Iranian officials themselves have described as unprecedented. The assassination of figures associated with the nuclear and missile programs, the penetration of Hezbollah's communications infrastructure at a level sophisticated enough to turn pagers into weapons, the ability to strike inside Iran with what appears to be detailed real-time intelligence about target locations. These are not random successes. They describe a systematic intelligence campaign that has hollowed out parts of the IRGC's operational security in ways that will take years to repair, if they can be repaired at all. And the Iranian population watching all of this, watching the currency collapse, watching the proxy network crumble, watching the regime fail to protect its own people or advance any of the goals it has demanded sacrifice for over 4 decades, is not rallying around the flag. It is not experiencing the nationalist surge that authoritarian governments often produce when faced with external threat. The opposite appears to be happening. Social media footage emerging from inside Iran, footage that the regime cannot completely suppress despite extensive filtering, shows something that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Ordinary Iranians expressing open contempt for the leadership, not whispered, not coded, open, direct, naming the supreme leader, questioning the revolution itself, asking with a directness that carries real risk what exactly the Islamic Republic has given them in 46 years besides poverty, isolation, and the deaths of their children in proxy wars they never consented to fight. The brain drain accelerating out of Iran tells its own story. An estimated 150,000 to 200,000 highly educated Iranians, doctors, engineers, academics, entrepreneurs, have been leaving the country annually for the past several years. These are not people fleeing because they are criminals or dissidents in the traditional sense. These are the people a functioning society needs to rebuild. They are leaving because they have made a calculation that the Islamic Republic has no future, capable of supporting their ambitions or their children's futures, and that waiting around to find out if they are wrong is not a risk worth taking. When a country's most educated and capable people leave at that rate and show no signs of stopping, you are not watching a society in temporary difficulty. You are watching a society in a process of fundamental restructuring whose endpoint is not yet determined. What happens next inside Iran is genuinely unknown, and anyone claiming certainty about it is not being intellectually honest. The Islamic Republic has surprised analysts before. It has survived crises that looked terminal. The combination of oil revenue, IRGC coercive capacity, and the genuine ideological commitment of a minority of the population should not be dismissed. Authoritarian regimes can persist in conditions of severe dysfunction for a very long time. Cuba, North Korea, Belarus, the machinery of repression, when it remains intact and willing to use maximum force, can hold a lid on a population that is overwhelmingly opposed to the government it lives under. But Iran in April 2026 is not the Iran of even 5 years ago. The multiple simultaneous pressures, economic, military, geopolitical, psychological, demographic, are not easing. They are intensifying. The proxy network that provided strategic depth is functionally gone. The deterrence that kept adversaries cautious about direct military action has been compromised. The nuclear option that might restore deterrence carries risks the regime calculates as existential. The economy is not in recession. It is in a process of structural disintegration. The population is not merely unhappy. It has lost faith in the fundamental legitimacy of the system in a way that is different from previous cycles of discontent. And the supreme leader, who has personified the Islamic Republic for 35 years, is 85 years old. And no one, not inside Iran, not in Washington, not in Tel Aviv, not in Riyadh, knows what happens the day after he is gone. Something is moving through Iran right now that is unlike anything in the 46 years of this republic's existence. Not a revolution, not yet. Not a collapse, not yet, but a reckoning. A structural unraveling that is visible from the inside and the outside simultaneously, moving at a pace that the people living through it can feel accelerating beneath their feet, and that the government trying to stop it is running out of tools to slow. The next 12 months inside Iran may be the most consequential in the country's modern history, and most of the world is not paying close enough attention.